keep your cameras so big. Hope you guys are having an awesome evening. Why don't you, if you're able to, invite you to stand with us as we continue to worship. No obligation. Yeah, let's pray quick and we'll continue on with worship. So Father God, we thank you for this chance to get together, Lord, and just celebrate who you are and the joy that we have in you. I pray that is what would be at the forefront of our minds, Lord. That's what we would, our hearts would just contemplate here tonight, Father. You're in your presence, that we would just feel and know your joy, and have that sense of that peace that passes all understanding. Father God, you are good, and help us to know that we can find all of our hope and all of our joy in you, Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen. Let's Lord, have your way in me.
Welcome to Canvas Church here in Oak Bay. And let me just say, we're so glad that you're here tonight. Really, we believe that taking a chance and going to a new church, which is what we are, just meeting once a month right now, to step out and to go to a new church that you're probably not all that familiar with, that's not all that hasn't been around all that long, is a huge step. And so we believe that's not even really a natural step, right? That's not something that I was telling some folks earlier today, you might be a little unsure about grocery stores, but everybody's got to eat. So at some point you're going to go to a grocery store, whether you like it or not, right? It's kind of a natural thing that you're going to end up doing. Going to a new church is not really like that. And so we believe that if you're here tonight, we believe that God is at work in your heart in some way, and that you're not here by accident. And so So I hope that that excites you. Maybe that worries you. It excites me because it means that that the God of the universe who loves you is at work in some way in your life, and I believe that you're not here by accident tonight. And so so if you don't know anything about Canvas Church, we're a new church starting in Oak Bay. There's a Canvas Church over on the West Shore. That's been around for about 4.5 years, and God's doing amazing things over there. And about a year and a half ago or so, monthly services started here in Oak Bay with a desire for a Canvas campus to start here in Oak Bay. And my wife Sarah and I moved here this past January to be at the front end of that and to give leadership over that. And so right now we're just meeting once a month for times like this. But we get together to serve the community when we have opportunity to do so, and to gather together to encourage each other. And so so there's things that are going on, and in the new year in 2019 we'll officially launch every week, services every week. And so so we are praying as God leads us towards that He would be the one who leads us. And everything we do at Canvas Church really comes down to 4 main values. If you want to know what we're all about, the best way is to spend time with us. The second best way is to look at the core values, which are Jesus, relationships, families, and our community, blessing our community. And so everything filters through those 4 things if you want to know what we're about. And we've started a teaching series for the fall. So we started it actually last month in September, and we're continuing in October this month, looking at the question, what is ... That really open-ended question, what is, and then leading into what I think are some of the big questions that everybody asks in their heart. They may not formulate them, write them down and say, I'm going to ask this question, but at some point we all ask these questions in our lives. And actually in some way we all answer these questions as well by the way that we live, whether we realize it or not. And so so tonight we're going to ask the question, what is happiness? What is happiness? And I want you to see what I think is a profound movie clip. And so so watch this clip. Every now and then Hollywood says some things that are great to grab onto. And so so check out this scene, and then we'll talk about it in a minute.
Take your hat off, mate.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Well, is it already done?
Yes, ma'am. In 1773, an official of this bank unwisely loaned a large sum of money to finance a shipment of tea to the American colonies. Do you know what happened?
Yes, I think I do. As the ship lay in Boston Harbor, a party of the colonists, dressed as Red Indians, boarded the vessel, behaved very rudely, and threw all the tea overboard. This made the tea unsuitable for drinking, even for Americans.
Precisely. The loan was defaulted. Panic ensued within these walls. There was a run on the bank.
From that time to this, there has not been a run on this bank. Until today, the runs are caused by the disgraceful conduct of your son. Do you deny it?
I do not deny it, sir, and I shall be only too glad to assume responsibility for my son.
What are you waiting for? Get on with it.
Yes, Father.
No, not that. Steady on. Well, do you have anything to say, Banks?
Well, sir, they do say that when there's nothing to say, all you can say.
Confounded Banks, I said, do you have anything to say?
Just one word, sir.
Yes.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
What?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Mary Poppins was right. It's extraordinary. It does make you feel better.
You're talking about men, there's no such word.
Oh, yes, it is a word. A perfectly good word. Actually, do you know what there's no such thing as? It turns out, with due respect, when all is said and done, that there's no such thing as you.
Impertinent, sir.
Speaking of impertinence, would you like to hear a perfectly marvelous joke? A real snapper.
Joke? Snapper?
Yes. There are these two wonderful young people, Jane and Michael, and they meet one day on the street, and Jane says to Michael, I know a man with a wooden leg named Smith. And Michael says, really? What's the name of his other leg?
The man's gone mad. Call the guard.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I'm feeling better all the time.
Banks, don't you dare strike my father!
There's the tuppence. The wonderful, fateful supercalifragilisticexpialidocious tuppence. Guard it well. Goodbye.
Banks, where are you going?
I don't know. I might pop through a chalk pavement picture and go for an outing in the country, or I might seize a horse off a merry-go-round and win the derby, or I might just fly a kite. Only Poppins would know.
Poppins?
My nanny. She's the one who sings that ridiculous song. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. The medicine go down. The medicine go down.
Mad as a March hare.
A wooden leg named Smith. A wooden leg named Smith. A wooden leg.
Father! Father! Father, come down! Daddy! Daddy, come back!
Classic stuff. You'd be thinking, what in the world does that have to do with anything? Well, here's what's going on. Mr. Banks realized that happiness didn't come from having a controlled family. It didn't come from having lots of money in his bank account. It didn't come from having a well-respected career. And it didn't come from having high social status. What he came to realize was that there was actually a joy available to him that he could have despite not having any of the rest of it. Right? When he lost everything else, he realized, there is a joy even at the bottom of all of that. And I still have a reason to laugh. I still have a reason to be happy. And what I love most about that clip is that it's contagious. That kind of true, deep, real joy is contagious. And by the time he leaves that meeting, he's got even that crusty boss who was firing him is even laughing, right? And true joy is actually contagious. I think there's a lot of biblical truth in a scene like that. And the great mathematician and philosopher Pascal said this: all men seek happiness without exception. They all aim at this goal, however different the means they use to attain it. They will never make the smallest move, but with this as its goal. This is the motive of all actions of all people, even those who contemplate suicide. He makes a big statement there saying that everybody is seeking happiness. No matter what they do, no matter what means they use to try and get there, everybody wants that. Everybody's trying to find out what that is. And so my question is, what is happiness and where does it come from? And for a long time, people used to answer that question with pleasure. They would say happiness is essentially pleasure, right? Things that feel good or things that bring you pleasure that causes happiness. And they've assumed that happiness is just kind of a synonym with pleasure. But what we find is that pleasure is actually a temporary experience. Even actually the way that our bodies are wired is for peaks and valleys, right? And pleasure, you notice it because it's not the norm, right? So you eat a piece of awesome chocolate cake and you're like, this chocolate cake is amazing. Why do you say that? Because as you're eating it, your tongue gets all this greatness into it, and you peak, you have this experience, you're like, man, this is bringing my body pleasure, but you don't stay up there, right? You come back down. So what typically happens? Well, pleasure becomes somewhat addictive. Because you don't stay up there, you keep seeking for more and more things that will get you there. And this is why drugs are so unbelievably dangerous, is because they give you this high, but you don't stay there. You actually come down, and the trouble with addictive things is it keeps you coming back for more, but your peak experience eventually becomes your baseline, right? Eventually that wears off, and so you have to keep topping it. And so, okay, this won't get me high anymore because I've become used to this. And so now I need something else. And then eventually that becomes normal. Now I need something else. And the pursuit of pleasure becomes this never-ending pursuit because it's not meant to satisfy all the time. And so you always end up chasing after things. But even if we could, let's say we could manipulate our brains so that we felt maximum pleasure all the time. There was actually a philosopher who thought about this, Robert Nozick, and he had this idea about the experience machine. And this would be similar to something like what you see in the movie The Matrix, where he said, what if you could hook your brain up? Because if all experiences end up getting to your brain and that's how you experience things, he says, what if we could just like put you to sleep in some chair, hook all this stuff up to your brain, find out like maximum pleasure setting, and just leave you there. And you could just like experience a day at Disney World eating chocolate cake with all your favorite people like indefinitely in your head, right? And in reality, you're just asleep. But in your head, we're just manipulating the neurons in your brain to feel maximum pleasure. Would that be true happiness? You see, if I could just manipulate my brain to get there, would that be happiness? And what people have said is well, no. There seems to be something missing in that, right? If you, to just spend your life sitting in a chair with, asleep with a bunch of things hooked up to your brain, that's not real happiness. And so it must be beyond that, right? Happiness must go beyond just manipulating our brains to feel something. Is there a type of happiness that is not determined by our current situation? Right? Is there something that could happen, something in us that could give us a joy that lasts even in the ups and downs of life, that is rooted in something regardless of our circumstances? And I want to show you something that Jesus said that connects to something in the Old Testament. And I love seeing this because the Bible really tells one unified story over the course of many, many years. That's my wedding ring. I take it off because playing that drum, I end up destroying the drum because of the wedding ring hits it right there. But the whole Bible is a unified story, right? It tells one narrative. And so I love looking at the Old Testament, seeing how it ties into the New Testament. And so I want you to look with me at Psalm 16 for a moment, and then we're going to look at something Jesus said. The writer of the Psalm says, he's speaking to God. By the way, the Psalms were songs. So like what we just did, singing those songs, the book of Psalms, these were things that were used in Old Testament times of worship. These were songs written to express human emotion towards God, but also to state true things about God. Music, right? Songs get stuck in your head, so it's a great teaching tool. And that's what the Psalms were in many ways, was to help people learn deep truths about God through the medium of music. And that's why music and singing is still part of church because there's so much value in it. So grateful to have, here, I'm going to get him with this laser. So grateful to have Jake, yeah, look at that, come and meet with us and move all the way from Saskatoon. Only been here less than a month, right? Hadn't been here that long. And just so grateful for him because of that. Listen to what the writer of this song says. It says, you, talking to God, make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy, and at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And he says, in your presence there's a joy that actually lasts forever. Fullness of life is actually found in the presence of God. And now look at what Jesus says in the book of John. He says, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. He's speaking to his disciples. He says, abide in my love. That means stay rooted, right? Stay connected in my love. Don't wander from that. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. So he says, abide in my love. Well, how do I do that? Well, I'll tell you how to do that. And if you obey my teachings, my commandments, then that will help you stay in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you. So he's like, why do I tell this to you? Why am I saying all these things, right? He says, these things I've spoken to you that my joy may be in you. Now don't miss this. When is he saying this? What hasn't happened yet, but is about to happen? Anyone? Any guess? A big significant moment in Jesus' life is yet to happen at this moment. He's going to the cross. So he knows that he's going to be executed in the most gruesome fashion available at that time. And yet he says, I have joy that I'm going to pass on to you. My thing is like, man, if someone's joyful all the time, but they have a really easy life, and they have a ton of money, and they're always doing fun things, and they'll be like, man, I have so much joy, I want to give some of my joy to you. I want to be like, well, man, you have a charmed life. Of course you have joy. But if someone can say, I know I'm about to be executed on false accusations, I'm an innocent man, I'm going to be executed in the most gruesome way possible, and yet I still have joy, even though that lies out in front of me. I want to be like, whatever joy that guy has, that's what I want. Because I don't want a joy from somebody when life is going well. Because everybody can be happy when life's going well, right? But when life is presenting you with an incredibly scary, difficult moment, and you can still have joy rooted in that, then I want to know what that's all about. Amen. I want to know what that joy is. And he says that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. He's saying what I have is greater than what you already have. Because your joy is not full yet, but I can give you joy. Tying back to that psalm that says, in your presence, God, is fullness of joy. He says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. It's amazing what he says. And the writer of Psalms says, the fullness of joy is found in the presence of God. There was just one problem in the Old Testament times. This question that everybody had to deal with was, so how do we enter the presence of God? Like, if that's where joy is, then how do I get there? Like, is that a place that I go to? Like, what's the status of my heart before God? How do I get to God's presence? Do I get a big ladder and climb it up to heaven? Like what do I do to get to God to experience this joy? And at that time, it meant all sorts of things, right? It meant all sorts of sacrifices, animal sacrifices, where they would say, look, I come before God and I'm guilty, I'm full of sin, and so how do I go before the great judge, moral judge of the universe, and as a guilty person, how do I take care of that guilt? And so they would make sacrifices. They would do all these purity rituals to try and say, how do I clean myself up to get to God? But all these things would just give them little moments, and they would come, and a priest would have to be a mediator between them and say, if you come to me, then I can be the middleman and connect you to God in some way. And it was this big, complicated thing. And then Jesus shows up. And Jesus comes and he says, I am actually God made flesh, come to you to die on a cross so that you might be guiltless. I have come so that I can pay that price, so that I can pay your debt, so that when you enter into God's presence, you no longer enter as a guilty person, but you enter as a forgiven person. Justice has been paid because I've paid it on your behalf, right? It's not like we wouldn't respect a judge who just said, oh, this person killed somebody? Well, everybody makes mistakes. Just let them go. You'd be like, well, wait a second. That's not just. Like justice needs to recognize that a crime has been committed and that justice has to happen in some way. And Jesus says, I will take that. I will be the one who takes that on myself so that you can walk free. And what does this mean? Well, it fixes the relationship, right? A relationship can be pretty awkward when you are full of guilt before the one that you have victimized. Right? But when the victim forgives the victimizer and says, the slate is clean, now you can come into my presence, now the relationship can go somewhere. Because if you're married or if you have maybe relationships with your kids or with some of your best friends, you know that relationships are fragile things. And the guilt of wronging another person destroys a relationship, put tension there, but forgiveness sets you free. Opens up possibilities for a relationship. And so what does that result in? Joy. If you've ever experienced that on a human level with another human, there's joy. When you hurt somebody and they forgive you, and all of a sudden they say, let's put this away and let's start over together. Man, there's nothing like that. So let me give you 3 observations on what Jesus is saying. And I've even alliterated these. I typically don't like to use alliteration, but it kind of helps to remember. And there's if you're a person who writes things down, you can write this down. But here's 3 observations on what Jesus is saying. 1, the joy that Jesus offers is deep. He says, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be not partial, not a little bit more, but that your joy might be complete, full. Give you this fullness of joy. There's a lot of people who experience moments of joy, but if you're dependent on your circumstances to bring you happiness, how fast can circumstances change? Well, so University of California, San Diego campus in 2009, somebody accidentally sent out acceptance letters to all 46,000 students who applied to the university, including the 28,000 people who had been rejected. So you can imagine, 28,000 people out there, 2009, are like, yes! I've been accepted at UCA, San Diego, go on to university. And then they got a follow-up letter a little while later saying, actually, I wouldn't be too excited about that. You haven't been accepted. Circumstances, man, they can change like that. One day you're like, going to UCA, San Diego. The next day, got to apply somewhere else. The ups and downs of our circumstances, right? If your joy comes from that, it can change so quickly. And I've found in my own life, often my search for joy is kind of selfish. And even when I go to God sometimes, I want to go to God because I want God to give me things that will give me joy. Does that make sense? So I pray to God and I say, God, I need whatever, a car. Poor Stephen. And car broke down, still found a way to be here and play keys for us all the way from the West Shore. That's commitment, man. Appreciate you. But it's like, man, I need a car. So I'm going to pray to God that He would give me a car so that that car would bring me joy. You see the danger in that is God just becomes the middleman. God just becomes the one that we pray to so that He will give us other things, money, relationships, whatever it is we're praying for, and then we still try to find our joy in those things. What if the joy that Jesus offers is actually in the context of a relationship with Him? And I think it is. I think what He says is, later on he goes in and talks about how you are to be in a relationship of love with God and love with other people. He puts it at a relational level. The context of relationship, everything else finds its proper place with God at the top of that hierarchy. He says, you come to me for joy. And if you put anything above me, that will not satisfy in the long term. St. Augustine put it this way: all the good things you love come from God, but they are pleasant and good only as they relate to him. Once your love deserts him, things rightly turn sour, because anything from God is improperly loved. I think there's so much wisdom in that, if it causes man to desert him. So he's saying, if you only go to God for what God can give you, the things that God can give you, those things won't satisfy. Because God has created life in such a way that he is meant to have a proper place within it. And so these things like the gift of music, saying, I love music, but you know what I really love about music? I love using music to help lead other people to connect with God. Man, what an amazing thing. It's different than just sitting in your car and listening to music, and that's good, and there's joy found in that. But when you can tie that in the context of a relationship with God, all of a sudden it takes on this deeper meaning. Here's the second thing that I think he's saying, is that the joy that Jesus offers is dynamic. And that's what I mean by that. It says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. And then a little later on he says, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Jesus speaks of joy from the context of relationship with him and with other people. Stagnant relationships are in trouble. They have to keep growing. They have to be dynamic. Right? If you're in a relationship and it's maybe you've been in a relationship and it's just not going anywhere, right? And you're like, man, we need to do something. Maybe you and your spouse, or you and a friend, or you and your kids, or something. You said, something needs to change in our relationship because we're not growing anymore. We're not going anywhere. It's just stagnant. That's toxic for a relationship. It doesn't mean you have to, do something exciting every single day. You're like, all right, so what should we do today? Let's bungee jump together. Like, right? But relationships, when they stop growing, they start growing stagnant. And some psychologists did a really fascinating study on this. They said, okay, what are sort of, if you would imagine the depths of maybe despair and the depths of joy, what would a lot of people say? It's like, well, a lot of people would say, well, something very difficult to deal with would maybe to become a quadriplegic. So to be paralyzed from the neck down, said that would be a really, really difficult thing. And what would be a joyful thing? A lot of people would say, well, maybe winning the lottery. And so they took these two things and they said, well, let's talk to these people. Let's see what their level of happiness is like after these things have happened to them. Does it level out, or does life just start going down? Does life just start going up? And you know what they found is that typically for people who have become paralyzed from the neck down and people who have won the lottery, what they self-profess as their happiness about a year later is about the same as it was before those circumstances happened. They found out that it typically takes about a year before you're back to your baseline. They said those things, they don't necessarily put you in the valley forever, and it doesn't necessarily put you up in the clouds forever either. That whatever your baseline happiness was before that, the psychologists during this study found out that you pretty much end up back there about a year later. Why is that? Because growth is essential to happiness. Right? This is why Jesus says joy is found in this thing that's dynamic, these relationships. Relationships are dynamic things. They're always changing. They're always growing. Many of you know Stephen Hawking. They've asked him fairly recently, before he passed away, they asked him, how have you been able to keep a positive outlook on life? And if you know Hawking, he was crippled by a disease in his early 20s that left him unable to do just about anything. And he's gone on to do amazing things in the fields of science, and he's written the most widely read science book ever written. But this is what he said. He says, my expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21. So when he was hit by this disease, everything since then has been bonus. So what does he mean by that? He says, when I went all the way down to the bottom, the rest of my life has been progress. Right? The rest of my life has been moving up. What he's saying is that my life has experienced growth along the way. And growth is essential for happiness because growth is essential for relationships. And Jesus says true joy is found in the context of a relationship with him, but also he says love each other. A relationship with other people. When those things are happening in a healthy way, those things are growing. That's dynamic. And joy can be found even in the most difficult circumstances when you're in these growing relationships. This is why it's so important to grow in your relationship with God. And it's also why it's important to grow in your relationships with people. And the last thing that I think Jesus is getting at is this. The joy that Jesus offers requires decision. So it's not automatic. Right? He says you don't just coast into this and it doesn't just happen to you automatically. It requires a decision. He says, if you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. He said, if you want this relationship with us to work, then listen to how I teach you to be in that. Now I can imagine what you're thinking because this is something I'm thinking. When I see something like that, I start thinking, wait a sec, obedience, doesn't that take away my autonomy? When somebody says you need to obey me or do what I command, do what I tell you, there's a certain thing in us that kind of bristles at that. It says, wait a second, like, what's this about you telling me what to do? Like, I want to hold on to my autonomy. I want to make decisions for myself. And there's a certain amount of us that starts to say, I don't know if I want somebody else telling me what I need to do. He says, if you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. Well, here's the thing I've come to realize, and I'm still coming to realize, is that we all follow somebody. We all follow something. Right? None of us are completely autonomous that, like, just about every thought in your head came from somewhere else, right? You've heard stuff, you've read stuff, you've learned things along the way, you've had experiences, you've had mentors, you've gone through school, like, just about everything in your head has come from somewhere else. It's not a whole lot of new ideas that are all we're doing really is taking old ideas that we've heard from other people and maybe trying to form them in a new way. But we're not necessarily this fount of new stuff. So everything we think, everything we do, really is a combination of a lot of influences, a lot of things that we've brought in. And what I've found in my own life is that I will follow somebody. Right? I'll find a thinker or a preacher or a parent or somebody that I'll take advice from and follow. Or maybe it's a thing, right? Maybe it's books, maybe it's whatever it is. We all follow something. And I've often asked myself the question too, who says I'm the most reliable guide to my own life? Like, I've made enough mistakes to know that I don't have it all figured out. Like, I don't know about you, but I've made enough mistakes to be like, I don't know if I trust myself. Like, I've led myself down some bad roads before, and I think I'm willing to see if somebody else has something to say about it. When I look at the life of Jesus and I realize, if this guy really did rise from the dead, and I think there's great reasons to believe that is a true event that happened. And I'd be happy to talk with you about that if you want to talk more about that. But in my mind, I say, if this happened, so it's not automatically true, but if this thing happened and Jesus really did rise from the dead, then it really did prove that he was the Son of God. He predicted this would happen. He taught with the authority of God. He claimed to be the Son of God. And if he really did rise from the dead, then I want to know what he thinks about things. Because if he really is the Son of God, I know that he probably has some wisdom that I don't have. Right? I would think that as the creator of life, he knows how best a life is to be fulfilled. Better than I know, because I know that I've made enough mistakes to realize that I don't have it all figured out. And so following Jesus is not blind obedience, right? It's not just, hey, you don't know me, you don't know anything about me, just do everything I say. I don't think faith as is presented in the Bible is ever blind faith, right? It's not, okay, do whatever the pink elephant says. You're like, there's no such thing as a pink elephant. Well, sure there is. Well, why do you think that? Well, there just is, right? Just believe it. It's like, well, that's blind faith, because there's no reason to believe that there's such a thing as an invisible, pink elephant. I don't know how the elephant's pink if it's invisible. I'm thinking through that much, right? But it's like, that's blind faith, right? That's just saying, oh, just believe something just because. I don't believe that's the faith that's presented in Scripture. It says, no, look at what happened, and then base your belief on what happened and take that step of faith. And I believe that if God is the creator of life, and He has created me to be in a relationship with Him, and He tells me through His commands how to have a relationship with Him, then I trust that if He is who He says He is, then that is going to lead to joy. Because I believe that He loves me and wants me to experience the joy He has created me to experience. And so I guess it breaks down like this. If joy is found in relation to God, then the closer my relationship is with God, then the greater my joy will become. And so that for me has been something that I believe is worth pursuing. Because like I said at the beginning, everybody wants to be happy. Everybody's seeking after that. And I believe that it's found in Jesus. So I'm going to invite Jake to come back up, and in a moment he's going to share a song, and I think he's going to tell a brief story behind the author who wrote this song, because it's an amazing song. But when you know the story, it's even more amazing. But as he sets up, let me ask you: are you happy tonight? Where have you been looking for your happiness? Where have you been seeking happiness? And I remember several years ago, I had an opportunity to be with my dad in the Middle East. I've never known how to pronounce it. Is it Qatar or is it Qatar? John, I assume that you know. You're well traveled.
I hear it's Qatar.
I hear it's Qatar too. So we're gonna go with that. It's over kind of in the general direction of Saudi Arabia. It's in that part of the world. And I had a chance to go there with my dad. He was going to be preaching at some things, and I was just going to participate with them and do a little bit with them. And we get there, and we come into this gated community where we're going to be staying. And there's guards standing out front with like big machine guns. And Jack, I don't know what you would have done. Probably what I would have been like, these guys have machine guns. Like, do they like me? Am I okay? Am I on their good side? And we come in, and this guy walks up to our car. And our driver rolls down the window, and the guy sticks his head in our car, and he says, "Which one of you is Richard Blackaby?" That's my dad's name. And he was sitting in the front with the driver, and I was sitting in the back. I'm just like, that guy right there. Richard Blackaby, right there. Like, the one you're looking for is this man. And this huge smile breaks out into this guy's face. He says, "My name is Charles. Welcome to where you'll be staying. So glad to have you. Super excited." He says, and which one is Mike?" And at this point, I'm like, okay, I think this is okay. I'm like, yeah, that's me back here. And the guy almost goes through the car to shake my hand in the back seat. And he's so glad that you're here. Man, all week long, early in the morning when we leave that gated community, Charles was there to greet us with a huge smile. When we come back late at night, sun was setting, Charles was there to welcome us back. And after a week of time there, we had a great time. We got to preach together, my dad and I, had some different things. And at the end of our time, we're packing up. We're going to leave the next morning. We're going to go to the airport. And Charles stops by the house to say goodbye. And I remember I'm up in the little loft area, and I'm listening to the conversation that he and my dad are having. And he's got a little bit of broken English, but I can pick out his story. And this is his life that he was leading. He was originally from the Sudan, and yet because he was a Christian, we found out he was a Christian, and we were like, man, we thought so because of this joy that was coming from him. But because he was a Christian, he was persecuted where he was. He lost his job because of his beliefs. they kicked him out, and because he had a family and some young kids, he tried to find another job, couldn't find one. So he had actually traveled and moved and planted his life in Qatar. And he had gotten a job as a security guard. And he worked, 7 days a week, 13, 14-hour days. There's a reason we saw him every morning and every evening. Worked hard. All he had was a concrete room that he lived in. Didn't have much else except the uniform that he wore, and shared that concrete room with 3 other men who were of another belief system, and continued to gang up on him and make fun of him and persecute him for his Christian beliefs. He could only see his family every few years. They would let him go back. And so he was working, some of why he was working so much was to build up some overtime so that he could go back and see his family sooner. And the reason he lived in such poverty was because most of the money he made, he was sending back to Sudan to support his family. As his kids grew up, and he didn't even get to watch them grow up. And he told us about one day when some of the men that he worked with came with a leader of their religion, and they came up to him, and the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a big wad of money. A wad of cash that was so much, it may have even allowed him to go home and see his family. And he said, "This can be yours. I'll give this to you right now on one condition. You turn your back on Jesus. You renounce him right now. You leave the faith. You turn your back on Jesus and you come to our religion. This money can be yours." And as tears are streaming down his and mine and my dad's face at this point, he says, I turned the money down because I have Jesus and nobody can take that away from me. Man, a guy who loses everything and still has Jesus. And he says, this is enough. The most joyful man I think I've ever met, coming from the most brutal of life circumstances with a smile on his face, would not say that his life is easy, would not say that Jesus just made his life a bed of roses, but said, Jesus has given me a joy that stays with me even if everything else is taken away. He knew that that wad of money was not worth rejecting the one who gave him that deep-rooted joy. I'll never forget that. That was, at this point now, I don't know, that was maybe 13, 14 years ago, still fresh in my mind. Charles discovered the source of happiness, a deep, dynamic decision to follow Jesus, because this was something that was accessible to him at all times, and because of that, it didn't matter what his circumstances were, because he still had that source of joy, that relationship. It doesn't mean that everything will be easy and pain-free. That's not a promise, right? Jesus never says, hey, follow me and everything's going to be easy. And I'm just going to fill your bank account, I'm going to give you the best job, the best friends, nobody's ever going to hurt you. He never says that. Ashley was sharing at the West Shore campus this morning. Jesus actually said the opposite. He said, you will face trouble, especially if you follow me. But, he says, I share these things with you so that your joy may be full. There's a joy that goes deeper than mere comfort of living. That's what I want in my life. I believe that's what we have been wired to seek. And so I want Jake to share this song with you. And the author of this song experienced some things in his life. And so I want you to share some of that story, and then I want you to hear the words of each song. And I hope that this encourages you tonight, and then we'll end our time together.
Yeah, so this song is it's called "It Is Well," and you know what? That's the it's a different one. We're kind of doing the older hymn version. It goes, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." And the song, some of you may have heard the story behind it before, and it was kind of written out of a place of just immense pain and loss. Actually, kind of similar to another song that we sung tonight. We did "Your Grace Is Enough," and Matt Maher wrote that song right after, I believe it was his fiancée, a relationship that was headed towards marriage, and it just kind of fell apart shortly before. And from that space, he wrote that song. But this song, "It Is Well," yeah, we got it there. So Horatio Spafford is the name of the guy who wrote it, and he was a lawyer and businessman in the States from Chicago, and he was basically, his family was planning on going to Europe. He had some emergency last-minute business problems come up, so he sent his wife and 3 daughters on a ship to Europe 3 days ahead of him. And he found out 4 days after the ship had set sail that it had crashed into, I believe it was a Scottish ship, and sank. And his wife and his 3 daughters did not survive the crash. And it's from this place of just immeasurable loss that he wrote this song. So I'm gonna sing it, and if you know it, please feel free to sing along. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. And I sing, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin not in part said, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the drum shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul.
Pray that if you can't say those words and they be true for you tonight, I pray that in time that would be true. That no matter what you face, what horrible circumstances might come around your life, you might be rooted in a relationship with God and other people, so much so that you can say it is still well. The circumstances are terrible, but in my soul, things are at peace. And so I want to thank you again for coming tonight. And as we wrap up, just want to make you aware of a couple of things. One is there's some cards like this out on your chairs. I think every other chair. If you're visiting with us and you're interested in maybe more of what we're about or what we're doing or where we're headed in the future, or if you want to connect with me and just have me buy you a coffee or lunch or just chat some more about what we're all about, I would love to do that. And so if you wouldn't mind putting your information on this, there's a little chest in the back on the table where the tea is. Just fill that out and drop that in there, and that'll just be a way for me to connect to you. And so put as much information on there as you feel comfortable putting on there, and that will make its way to me, and I would be happy to connect with you in whatever way. So just fill out on there what you would like me to know or what you would like to know, and I'd be happy to connect with you. Also, if you feel led tonight to give financially to help the ministry and what we're doing and things that we're doing in the future, you can also use that card for that purpose as well. Let me tell you about one thing, one of many things that I'm excited about that is an opportunity that we have to be about one of our core values, which is community, blessing our community. We meet here right in the heart of Oak Bay Village, and one of the opportunities that we have is actually this Wednesday. There's a big community event going on. And a lot of the local businesses are opening their doors for kids, for trick-or-treaters to come in, and they're giving treats out to the kids. And they shut down the whole main street here for kids to come and families to come, and fun atmosphere. And they're going to let us set up some tents right in the middle of the street and set up some games and to have some treats to give to the kids and just be a part of a big community event. And so we need volunteers who want to be a part of that. It's this Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and we're just going to be just fun carnival-type games, just for the kids to have a great time. Let me give a quick note on that, though. Halloween can be a controversial thing. It's got roots back in history that can be uncomfortable, and so I want to make real clear what we are doing and what we're not doing. As a church, what we're not doing is somehow celebrating Halloween. We're not saying, hey, we want to celebrate or highlight some of the roots of what this is. I don't think, and I've been in contact with the lady who's organizing the whole thing. That's not the purpose of the event either. The purpose of the event is to bring community and families together and to have a good time together. And that is something that I think we can get behind. I think we say we want to bless the community, and we want to see families having fun together and people to be coming out and spending time together. And so we can get behind that. And so I just want to make that real clear that as a church, what we're not doing is waving some sort of Halloween flag or a celebration of any of the historical roots of where that has come from. What we are doing is saying we want to come alongside the community in a great opportunity, not just to bless people, but also they're letting us have information about the church and be very open about who we are and why we're here. And so what I'm hoping is that this allows us to connect to the people in our community, that we might have conversations with people, we might be able to tell them what Canvas is all about, what Jesus has done in our lives, and even just to meet the neighbors, right? Meet some people in the community. And so if you can be a part of that, if you want to be a part of that, we would love to have you come and join us. It's going to be a great time, and I believe that God is going to use that opportunity to help us connect and build relationships with our community and share this joy that we talked about with families as we come together. Another thing is there's a community group that is meeting once a month at Maya and Sarah's house. And so the next one is going to be coming up in November. And what that time is a time to just casually gather in our living room. We live just down the street from here. To gather in our living room and to open up the Bible together, to look at some foundational scriptures of who we are as a church. And that's a great place to come with questions, or if you want, it's discussion. And so it's not me presenting a lot of stuff. It's us sitting around together in a living room and asking questions and talking about it and digging into things. I'm not really sure about this, or what does this mean? What does this mean for my life? And asking questions about the church, like what are you guys all about, and that sort of thing. So if that's something that you're interested in as well, you can fill that out on one of these cards and say, hey, tell me more about that, or you can email me, mike@canvaschurch.ca. I would be happy to tell you more about it. Last thing, before I let James share about his painting tonight, is our next time together here is November 25th. And so be praying for that, because the same lady that is organizing all of this stuff this Wednesday is also organizing all the Christmas stuff that happens here in Oak Bay Village. And she has said that she would love for us to be a part of that. And so it kicks off November 25th, which is our night here. And so I don't want to say too much before it's like set in stone, but we're thinking of how can we use this opportunity to be a part of what the community is doing. Like, it kicks off, Santa's rolling into town about 5 o'clock that evening, and so I'm gonna ask if maybe we could do something and let people know that we want them to come be a part of what we're doing. We're not gonna just hide away in here while all the party's out there. We want to be a part of that. Christmas is a time to celebrate who Jesus is. And I think we could have a great celebration singing the great Christmas carols of the faith. And so that's November 25th. Be praying for that, because I would love for that to coincide somehow with all the other stuff that's going on, and to use that as a way to bless our community. James is an amazing talent, but he's also got an amazing heart. All the paintings in this room were painted by James, as many more. But God has given him a gift, and he uses that gift to give visual expression of the truths of who God is. And so, James, if you want to share, you should be able to use this one. I can hold that for you if you want to share.
My idea was, I knew that Mike was going to be talking about joy, and a joy that's not a superficial joy, but a joy that comes from a deep relationship with the Lord. And I was started off with this as being a portrait of a girl who's holding the Word of God, and it's kind of dark around her, but there's an inner color, there's an inner joy that's coming through. That's what I want to show. And that's what I firmly believe, that the Word of the Lord is our source of joy. That's where we learn what joy is. But the Word of the Lord is also a relationship, because Jesus is the Word made flesh, and it's really only in relationship with Him, who embodies the Word, that we have joy. And I was thinking too, when that song was being sung, you know, as well with my soul, that you know, this could have been one of his daughters or his wife that was on that boat, and it's kind of like the water around here, and there's a face here and a face here as well, and she could have still had that joy even in the midst of that storm if she knew Jesus, even though that she knew that she'd not see her husband again in this life, and that her and her two daughters, they're not going to make it. But I believe that smile, that joy was still in her heart, going down, knowing that she would be with the Lord, she would see her husband again one day, and they would have an eternal home. So I hope that's awesome.
That's great. Give our live stream a view of that as well. Well, thank you guys so much again for being here. Would you stand with me? And it would be my privilege to pray for you before we head out tonight. We come from all different places. We're going through all different things. But I believe that God is big and powerful enough to handle whatever problems you face. And so let's pray together. Let me pray for you, and then we'll be done tonight. God, we thank you. We thank you that no matter what happens to us, we have reason to have joy. Because it goes deeper than our circumstances. And our circumstances can change in the blink of an eye. One phone call from our doctor. God, one fight with a close personal relationship. One failure. Lord, one sickness, one event. Lord, we think of those in the States today who fell victim to another shooting. God, we realize that even life itself can change in an instant, can be taken from us. And yet, Lord, if what you said is true, that if you can give joy that is complete, that is full, would you give that joy to us tonight? Lord, we know that it requires decision to be in relationship and to follow you. And so, Lord, I pray that wherever we are in that journey, that you would walk with us. If we have made that decision and we desire to be in relationship with you and to walk with you, and we have put our trust in you, would you take us deeper? Would you take us to the next level in our relationship with you? And Lord, if we're not quite there yet, if we have questions, if we're trying to figure it out, God, would you honor our questions? Would you show yourself? Would you guide us on our journey? That as we seek truth, whatever that might be, Lord, would you guide us to yourself? Lord, I thank you for each person who is here. Would you bless them? God, would you bless them out of your character? As a God who loves each of us, we thank you. We have reason to sing. Even if, like me, we're not a good singer, God, there's still a reason to sing because of what you've done for us. Thank you. Would you bless each one of these as they go this week? We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys. We'll see you again soon. Meet somebody that you don't know.